Welcome to the Book Bungalow's virtual author event featuring Cory Anderson, author of the YA literary novel, What Beauty There Is. My name is Tanya Mills, and I'm the owner and manager of the Book Bungalow in St. George, Utah, Southwest Utah's only independent bookstore, offering all new books and a full range of events. While we're open and taking precautions, we're still doing many of our events virtually and plan to continue a mix of virtual and live events in the fall, depending on how COVID progresses. This meeting is being recorded. This event is part of the 24th annual Utah Humanities Book Festival. This annual free festival is the Utah Humanities gift to the community, allowing us to explore all sorts of ideas by interacting with great writers like Cory. The complete program is available at www.utahhumanities.org, and I will be putting that link in the chat room. Our thanks to the Book Festival's major sponsors, George S. and Dolores Story Eccles Foundation, Salt Lake City Arts Council, Salt Lake County Zoo Arts and Parks Fund, Summit County RAP, Weber County RAMP, the Charles Redd Center for Western Studies, the King's English Bookshop, Weller Bookworks, the National Endowment for the Humanities, the National Endowment for the Arts, and Catalyst. Also, we want to acknowledge that the Book Bungalow resides on the original territory, once inhabited by the ancestral Puebloans and the Fremont indigenous people. Today, southwestern Utah is primarily home to the San Juan Southern Paiute tribe and the Paiute Indian tribe of Utah, a confederation of 5 bands: Cedar, Indian Pinks, Kanash, Kisharam, and Shivlets. Tribes that have been living, working, and residing on this land from time immemorial. We acknowledge the painful history of genocide and forced removal from this land, and we honor and respect the indigenous peoples still connected to the land on which we gather. Let's have a brief moment of silence as we think about and pay respect to the indigenous peoples of past and present. Throughout the months of September and October, the Book Bungalow has offered and will continue to offer a wide variety of author events and even a writing workshop as part of this year's book festival. We invite you to check our event schedule on our website at www.thebookbungalow.com and register now if you want to attend an event, whether live or virtual. With the exception of our virtual game night next Monday for the first 10 groups or families to register, we'll be competing against the author of the book, Big Family Games, the Big Book of Family Games. You can register, with the exception of that, there are free tickets available for all the events. In a minute, I'll be turning the time over to our author, Cory Anderson, as she has a slideshow she'd like to share with you before doing a brief reading and then taking questions. Please note that if any of you haven't already purchased her book, I'll be adding a link in the chat room to order it through our website. I'll also post a link to her website, and you'll all receive a follow-up email that will include both links again, as well as a link to this recording, because there may be some who have not been able to join us tonight. Finally, I'll be posting a link to an online book festival audience survey. We want to thank you for attending the festival. We work hard to make sure each event meets our mission of improving communities through active engagement with the humanities. $10 gift cards to the King's English will be raffled off for anyone who completes the survey. And next year, I'll try to make sure they include some gift cards from our store as well. What Beauty There Is Cory Anderson's YA novel about brutality and beauty, and about broken people trying to survive. Perfect for fans of Patrick Ness, Laura Ruby, and Meg Russell. Cory is a winner of the League of Utah Writers Young Adult Novel Award and grand prize in the Storymakers Conference first chapter contest. What Beauty There Is her debut novel. I'm going to turn the time over to Cory now so she can share the screen to show some slides related to her book. Go ahead, Cory.
Great. Thank you so much, Tanya. I am so happy to be here, and I really appreciate the chance to be with the Book Bungalow and to take part in the Utah Book Festival. It's just a real honor to be a part of the festival. And so thank you for organizing this and for giving me the chance to come and talk with readers. So I am the debut author of What Beauty There Is. This is my first novel. It's a young adult novel. I would say that this is a literary thriller. So you'll find elements of kind of crime noir, which I really love. And it is written with a little bit of a literary style. I adore things like Daniel Woodrell and Winter's Bone, or The Road by Cormac McCarthy. If you like that kind of thing, those are just right up my alley. And I always wanted to write something that would feel like I was devoting myself in the way that these authors do, that I admire so much. So I'm really happy to be here. And I wanted to just start by telling you a little bit about the book. It is set in the hometown that I grew up in. I was born and raised in St. Anthony, Idaho, actually in Parker, which is kind of adjacent to St. Anthony. And Tanya knows that. Tanya, is it Tanya or Tanya?
Tanya.
Tanya, okay. And so I have always had this deep connection to Idaho. It feels like Idaho runs through my veins. It's in my blood. And when I was getting ready to write a book, I thought, what is the one place that I feel like I could really honestly, in a bedrock way, talk about? And I settled on St. Anthony because it is where I'm from. So the book is set in St. Anthony, and it tells the story of Ava and Jack, two teens who get caught up in a drug deal gone wrong and a deadly game of betrayal. So I'm going to start by sharing just a few photos of the setting for What Beauty There Is. This is where I grew up. And so these are just photographs from over the years, some things that might give you a flavor of where What Beauty There Is takes place. And I'm going to screen share. Let's hope this works out. If it doesn't, please give me a minute and I'll come back if I happen to lose you. Okay, let's go and give this a shot. Let's see. Well, I did this on my practice section, and I'm not sure if it's working. Let me try this, Tanya, and see if it works for us.
If not, we can.
It's not. Oh no. Let me try one more time. Can you see this now?
No.
Oh, you can't. Okay. Let me try. Bear with me for just a minute.
Oh,
well, darn, I don't know if I'm going to be able to do it, Tanya. I am trying and
okay,
it's not giving me.
What's the name of your cat?
Bo is running around. I'm sorry. His name is Bo, and he is unhappy when I lock him in the bedroom. So I thought that he would be better for us if he was out.
Okay.
Has he been wandering around behind me?
That's okay. Well,
maybe I can make the slideshow available through a link.
yeah.
And
If
it would be really
email it-
fun.
If you email it to me, I can put it in the email I send to everyone. Because I have a feeling
Perfect.
several people aren't able to log in for some reason. So I'll have to
Perfect. Why
send
don't
you
I do
one.
that? I will share it through a link. I should have practiced this a couple more times. I watched a little tutorial and apparently it was not enough. So we'll get that to you though. And I will just start with a reading. How does that sound?
Sure.
Okay, great. So what Beauty There is an interesting style of story in that it has a narrative framework in which 17-year-old Ava Bardem acts as both a character in the story as well as she's one of the primary characters. She's a protagonist in the story. And then she is also the narrator who is walking the reader through the story. And so it's kind of interesting. Each chapter will start with an italicized part that is Ava speaking to you. And so I'd love to start by just reading that first italicized piece from Ava. My life has faded to floating bits of black and white, but I remember the minutes with Jack in color, in a vivid haze of red and yellow and blue. Sensory things, the sound of his voice, the smell of him, like a forest in winter. I can see him lying beside me with the moonlight on his face. His hand holds mine and I'm warm all over, despite the cold. I can feel his breath on my skin. I don't forget these things. I told Jack to stay away. He'll make you hurt, I said. He'll take what matters most. He'll do it with a smile and then he'll smoke a cigarette. Jack didn't listen. But I go to the end, when to understand the truth, you have to start at the beginning. So that's just a little teaser from the book. It's kind of the introduction, and hopefully it gives you just a little flavor of what the book is like. So
It definitely does. Feel awful. Like 3 or 4 people are emailing me, and I'm trying to do this at the.
Oh
They
no.
can't get into the. If they go to the event, no, they're not hearing this, so they can't. I don't know how to deal with that. I'm just going to have to send them the recording after. Okay.
Yeah, we'll roll with it.
Okay. Well, first, I wanted to know a little bit more. Your bio is the shortest bio I've come across on a website. I want to know how long you've wanted to be a writer.
Oh.
And how long you worked at it, and what kind of practice you got, whether you took classes or went to conferences or just worked on your own. Go ahead and tell us more about it.
Wonderful question. Thank you. I think that I don't even remember a time when I didn't want to write books. I grew up in rural Idaho in the middle of nowhere. And my family, we didn't have a lot, but my mom and dad every week took us to the library. And I just grew up on books. stories captured my imagination from the moment I was able to have them read to me by my mom or my dad. And then, when I was able to do it myself, I would take piles of books home from the library. And I think it was in 7th grade that I entered my first writing competition. And I wrote a book that very much was a poorly plagiarized version of Black Beauty. So it was not good at all, but it was my first attempt at writing. And we had horses, and I just thought Black Beauty was the greatest story. And so I think that was when I started to write, and I had notebooks, and I would keep little snippets of writing here and there all through my childhood and growing up years. And I went off to college and decided that I was going to study math. So I don't know where I took this turn, but always in the back of my mind, even at college, I thought one day I'm going to go back to writing. And I got married and I had a family, and things started to kind of settle down, and books captured my heart once again. And I just started to write, and I realized after a little bit of time that I wasn't going to be able to do it unless I got help. And so I started to attend conferences. I went to the Utah League of Writers. I don't know if you're familiar with the league, but I started to go to a chapter of the League of Writers, and that's where I met some friends who I started to have a critique group with. And I have been a part of critique groups for about 20 years.
Wow.
So yeah, so honing that craft and learning how to write, I've really invested a long time.
Are any of
Um,
the friends in your group also published?
yeah, there
Oh,
are friends
wonderful.
who are published. Margot Hovley writes for
Yeah.
Covenant,
Uh-huh.
and you would probably be familiar with Josie Kilpack,
Josie
who,
is in your group? Well,
yes.
yes, I've known her for years.
I love Josie. She's one of my best friends. And let's see, Nancy Allen
Yeah.
writes, and she writes both in the regional and the national market. So we have this flourishing um, community of writers in Utah, and it is a beautiful thing. If you're someone who's interested in writing, there are opportunities here that I think are really rare. So many writers who are willing to help one another, and we really support one another. Erin Stewart is a good friend of mine. She's a YA writer for the national market. She wrote Scars Like Wings. I'm not sure if you're familiar with that one, but so yeah, so that community of writers has been so helpful to me, and the league and the conference that the league puts on, as well as the book festivals that are here in Utah, and the Storymakers Conference is probably one of the best conferences that I think an aspiring writer can go to for learning and gathering information and just kind of honing craft.
I'll agree
In
with that.
fact, I got What Beauty There Is ready at Storymakers in what they have, they call a publication primer. So before I went to query the book, I went to Storymakers and I did a little primer and got everything ready. And What Beauty There Is took me about 7 years to write. So I was working full time, and I was a single mom of 2 children, working full time and fitting writing in on weekends and late at night. And I think in some ways, writing What Beauty There Is sustained me through those years. It kept the dream alive. And so let's see, have I answered the question?
Yes,
Or
I
have I
think,
missed anything?
no, I think that's a pretty good lengthy
Great.
answer. What about your upbringing in southeastern Idaho? influenced this story? I mean, I know there's the feel. It wasn't the feel I associate with Southwestern Idaho, but more about that in a minute.
Well, I think that there are kind of two things there that two prongs to that as far as answers to your question. I just love the Rocky Mountains and the woods, like Targhee National Forest. I grew up there. My dad was law enforcement
Oh,
for
really?
Targhee National Forest. Yeah. And I mean, every vacation we ever went on as a kid was camping in Targhee National Forest. And so that is very dear to my heart. And that like entryway to Targhee, which is kind of that St. Anthony, Ashton area. And I really wanted to capture what it's like there in the winter time. So people who read the book often comment on how the cold and the season of winter feels almost like a character in the book. And I feel like that was something that I wanted to be able to get that feeling across. And the final scenes of the book also happened there in Targhee National Forest. And if you look at the slideshow, some of those pictures of St. Anthony and Targhee are there. And I wish I could share it, darn it, but sometime we'll get to those. I think the other thing, if I were to answer the question, is rural Idaho is this amazing place, but there are also people there who are struggling. Rural communities in the United States often deal with things like people who are involved with drug addiction and food scarcity. And I really wanted to try to capture something of that. In fact, when I started writing What Beauty There Is, I had just gone through a rough spell of my own. I had just gotten separated and went from living a life as a pretty secure life to within a few months finding myself with an eviction notice and an empty cupboard.
Wow.
And wondering where I was going to find a way to take care of my two kids. So the story of Jack and Maddie very much comes from that place.
You jumped ahead to my next question.
Oh, okay. But I really wanted to capture in their relationship kind of the roots of where I come from, which is I'm really, I feel like when I think of Southeastern Idaho, I think of family and the close bonds of siblings and friends. So I hope that that is kind of woven through the book. Despite it being this kind of treacherous story, there are moments of great intimacy and love.
That's true. It was an interesting mix because I didn't associate, for those of you who don't know, my father was born in Parker, Idaho, and his grandfather founded Parker, Idaho. So all I know of Parker, Idaho is when we would come home on leave and visit all the relatives there in the summer. And it was a very warm place in the summer, you know.
Right.
So,
and it's almost idyllic, right? In
yeah.
the summer. And I think winter is different, especially if you go past Rexburg. I mean, you go to 20 below zero pretty quickly in the wintertime. and it can be rough. Yeah. So
my question, you kind of alluded to it with all the things with foster care and the drug abuse and prison, child abuse. Were the grittier parts of this story based on actual people or events?
Well, I think that the best way that I feel like that I answer that question is using a quote from Neil Gaiman, and he says that storytellers tell the truth with lies.
That's true.
And so I really wanted, in so many ways, What Beauty There Is a chance for me to tell my story. It really is. And that in no way means that I grew up in a family where we were meth dealers, or that, you know, I was on the run from the law. But I think that the core emotions of the book definitely come from me and my life. And so for me, it was like telling the truth, but laying that truth over a story.
Uh-huh.
So I have never had much to do with meth distribution, but I definitely looked it up, and I was really interested in it because my dad's law enforcement.
Mm-hmm.
And because I was aware of the trafficking that happens from Mexico through Idaho. It's actually a really substantial problem. And so I thought, well, I think I can tell a story and say the things that I want to say and give this family, you know, a life, and then I can tell my story kind of through that lens. So Jack and Maddie, you know, and them being kind of desperate, it really does come from sometimes in my life when I have felt that way.
Uh-huh. What?
Uh,
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
I could talk about Ava too, if you'd like me to, or
In a sec, let me ask first.
okay.
What's been your family's response to the book? Your father's in particular.
Well, so one thing that I try really hard when I talk to people like in a situation like this, I have a picture in the slideshow of my dad. He is my hero. He is law enforcement, and he is very Much Doyle for me. So if anyone has read the book, Doyle is the sheriff.
Yeah.
And he is this good-hearted man who is trying to do his job, and he's trying to help these kids and do his best. And that for me is my dad. And so sometimes I worry that people think I come from this house where my father is like Bardem.
Oh, yeah.
Which is not the case at all. But for me, Bardem was kind of a metaphor for other experiences that I had had in my life. So my dad is Doyle, and Bardem is kind of my way of being able to talk about abuses of power that have happened in my life. So I don't know if that makes sense if you haven't read the book, but
well, I read the book, so it makes sense. But
if anyone listening hasn't, but
what would you say the overriding theme of the book is? Because I mean, there's several seem to be themes like responsibility, forgiveness, healing from being broken. What was the main thing you were going for?
Oh, goodness.
Or were you just trying to tell a story?
I think that every writer feels like that they have something important from their heart that they want to share. You know, there are so many kinds of stories. There are entertaining stories, and we have heroes' journeys, and you know, tragedies and romance. In every single one of those, I think that the person behind the story has something that they're trying to get across. But for me, I didn't have a theme that I was like wanting to knock over the head of the reader. I really just wanted, let me see if I can say this in a simple way, but I wanted the chance to talk about my life in a way that I could give it some beauty. And there were two ways that I wanted to do that. One was with Jack and Maddie and their relationship and what they went through. I really wanted to be able to express something there about love, and especially the love that we have in dark times. And then probably if there were one thing that were primary, it would be Ava's story. for me, Ava becomes the heroine of the story. And for me, the journey of writing the book was a journey of becoming my own heroine in my own story. And I guess I would say that our girls fight every day, these young women, and it is often at this great cost to themselves. And that is a tragedy. So when I was writing What Beauty There Is, I just felt like I was on this train track coming to an end. And I wanted so desperately to tell the truth for Ava. And I was assaulted when I was Ava's age.
Oh,
And yeah. And so for me, Ava and she and I have the same black heart
oh,
on
yeah.
our wrists. And we have those hearts for the same reason. I think after I was assaulted, I thought that I had developed this cold black heart and that I'd lost the capacity to love. And it took a long time for me to learn that that wasn't true. So Ava's story is really dear to my heart. It's a way for me to talk about overcoming something really, really hard and learning about what it means to survive and to give life beauty.
Yeah.
So
I imagine she was the character that came to you first.
she was, yeah. Ava and Jack are both me in different ways, but if there were one that I feel like has the soul of the book, it's Ava.
Yeah.
So yeah, she's.
And so she probably means the most to you, it sounds like.
She does. Yeah, Ava does. She's definitely the one that for me is the heart of What Beauty There Is. So
yeah, I'm
and I don't want to give too much away.
No,
I feel like
I don't think you have. I don't
okay.
think you have. But I'm interested in the structure of the story and whether you had always structured it that way from the beginning. So, you know, how, for example, you came to decide to give Ada a voice to begin each chapter. Did that come in later or did it start out that way?
I wrote What Beauty There Is almost exactly as it is right now.
Wow.
So there was very little that went structurally, that changed structurally. I started out writing those little narrative parts from Ava. And in fact, those little bits and pieces from Ava, I would just, because it took me a few years to write, when I was feeling something that particularly inspired me, sometimes those pieces from Ava would come to me in little snippets and pieces, and I would write them down in, you know, put it in my phone or write it in a notebook. And very often those little snippets from Ava would become the seeds that a scene would build around.
Yeah.
And
Very well
so
done.
I'm not sure how that happened, but it really just, I mean, the book, I wrote it slowly, but I wrote it from start to finish.
So how much
and
of the
very little
story,
changed.
how much of the story evolved in your mind before you started putting it down? Or you just, as it came, you began putting it down?
I'll tell you, I wrote that first little piece from Ava introducing Jack, and I wrote that first scene where Jack comes home and finds his mom. And I had no idea what was going to happen next.
Yeah, I've had that experience. No.
And the book, in fact, I'm very much what I call an instinctual writer, or I do not outline.
Yeah.
So every scene, I would just kind of wait and see what was I wondered what was going to happen next.
So when you wrote, you didn't know how it would end.
Mm-mm.
No.
I knew that I could see this image of the end of the book taking place in the woods in the cold, and I could see this end where I knew that Ava was going to be facing her antagonist, but I didn't know anything else. I
And
had no
how
idea
she
how
was
I
going
was
to get
getting
from the
there.
beginning to there. Yeah.
Nope.
Okay. Sounds like I'm the same kind of writer as you.
So
These people who outline, I just go, oh.
oh, I couldn't do that, but I'm writing my second book right now, and I'm wondering if I need to outline. So maybe every book is different. I'm definitely wondering that right now.
So you worked on this for 7 years, right?
I did, yeah.
What was your daily, were you, okay, you 7 years, you were separated at some point. Did you start writing this when you were separated?
Yes, right after I separated. I mean, it was within a few months that I started writing What Beauty There Is. And it was really a time when I was feeling desperate. And I also felt desperate in terms of my writing. I had written a book prior to What Beauty There Is, and I had queried it. For those who understand like the querying process, you finish a book and then you send a letter out to agents to see if they might have an interest in representing you. And I had queried this book that I had put my heart and soul in. And I'd had some really great responses from agents, and had like a call with an agent at Writer's House who was like my dream agent. I really thought that it was going to happen, and ultimately it didn't. And so I had felt devastated about my writing. And I also, within that same probably 1 year period, separated from my husband, started to work full time, became a single parent. And it suddenly became, it almost felt impossible that I would ever have my writing dreams happen. It felt like the world was on my shoulders. And
what was your writing routine like? When did you write? When you had to take care? How many kids?
I had a son and a daughter, so two, and they were, young, quite young. And so I worked full time as a paralegal at a pretty intense job, worked full time and took care of my family. And then on weekends, I would go to writers' retreats here and there. On Thursday nights, I would go to my critique group. And here and there, wherever I could catch an hour or two, I would try to sit down and write.
So you weren't really writing regularly every day.
No.
Where you could get the time. Okay.
Where I could capture an hour and try to get something down. And sometimes there would be periods where nothing would happen, and I would wonder if it was time to give up. So yeah, I think
are you still single?
I have a boyfriend, so
okay. All right. Well,
so I don't know what that means. I'm not married, but
I'm just wondering if your writing routine is still catch as catch can now.
It is a lot different now. I sold What Beauty There Is to Macmillan in a 2-book deal, and so I'm writing full time now.
Wow.
And the dream that I really held on to for a long time, that was like my hope, it ended up coming true. So,
Are they going to make a movie of this?
So that is up in the air right now. What Beauty There Is has been optioned for film, but I can't go into any details about it because it's not something that has been announced, and it's kind of, there's been some upheaval with it.
Okay.
But we'll see. Fingers crossed. It could be, yeah, double fingers crossed.
Okay. What was the most the hardest or the most challenging part of the story to write for you? Did you ever get to a point where you had real writer's block in the middle of this?
I think one thing that was a real benefit of writing over a long period of time is I didn't ever just sit down at the computer and hit a wall because I was just pushing. I would have time where I was daydreaming and I was thinking about what was going to happen next while I was at work, or while I had time where looking back, those were the moments when I would figure out what was coming next in the story. And so I can't think of a time when I had a huge amount of writer's block. But I did have times. I am the world's slowest writer. I take great care with my sentences and my structure. And I'm about as picky as I could possibly be with like choosing the right word. so so I'm very slow, and sometimes scenes would take me a while before I felt like I could move forward, because for me they had to there's a rhythm and a flow that had to feel right. And so sometimes I would write a scene and I would then sit on it for a little while, and then I'd read it again and I'd make little tweaks and changes. And sometimes I would say, okay, this just isn't working, and I'd start over. But never did it feel like writer's block. I think the hardest scenes for me were actually the moments of intimacy between Jack and Maddie and between Jack and Ava. The action scenes actually flowed kind of like dominoes. It felt like one thing would happen and then there would be an action and a reaction that was just almost like dominoes. But those moments of intimacy were the ones that I think I took the longest on, because I wanted to get them right. So
now I don't want to monopolize all the time. I know we have Sarah. Do you know Sarah Flannery Murphy? She's got a YA novel out, science fiction kind of.
That name is super familiar. So
if there are questions that Sarah, you or Willie want to ask, please in the Q&A.
Hi.
Well, I'll ask a couple more. Well, okay, you alluded to that you're working on something now, and can you say anything about it?
I think that I would really love to always write a mystery thriller kind of crime noir books, and I would always like to set them in the Rocky Mountains. So I have started another young adult novel that I call a young adult Where the Crawdads Sing. So it is about a 17-year-old girl who is kind of living off the grid in Wyoming. And it is about the secrets of a small town and a murder that takes place in that town. And her brother is accused of the murder.
And so, is it because it's a murder mystery that you feel like you might have to outline?
Yes, it actually is, because right now I'm through the first third and I'm getting into some of the plot points where I need to get to an end, and I'm like, I don't know who the killer is. you kind of need to know that.
Yeah, we have to go back and change a bunch of things. Yeah.
So I may need to do some outlining this time around.
Are you always going to write young adult, you think? Or are you tempted to venture into more adult?
That's a hard question. In fact, I queried what beauty there is to agents who represented both adult and young adult fiction. And many people tell me that they feel like it reads more like adult literary fiction, which I totally get. And I agree that there are elements that feel literary and kind of like maybe not typical for young adult. But I really always wanted to write to young people.
Mm.
And so I feel like this is a book that hopefully anybody could pick up, a teen or an adult, and enjoy. But some of the things that I wanted to say, I was so moved by books when I was a teenager. And some of the things that I wanted to say, I wanted to be able to say them to young people.
What were some of your favorite reads as a teenager?
It's going to probably be surprising because a lot of it is fantasy, but I adored his Dark Materials by Philip Pullman.
Mhm.
And Ender's Game was one of my favorite books, and A Wrinkle in Time. Those were just books that I read over and over and over again.
And yet you don't want to veer
So,
into fantasy or
well,
science.
you know, there is a speculative element to What Beauty There Is.
That's
So you have this really naturalistic story, but there is a little speculative element to it, and that was kind of my way of adding into the story a few of those threads of what kind of where I come from in terms of my own love of books and my history with books. But I'm not against the idea of maybe writing something that would be fantasy. I wouldn't, I would never, I just have no idea what will happen. Maybe I will write for adult market, and maybe I will stay in YA. I just don't know.
okay.
So it feels like a good place right now to be in young adult. I just feel like I would love to talk to young people.
Okay.
So,
Sarah does have a question for you.
okay.
It says it's been such an amazing discussion. I'm curious to know which scenes were especially amazing or fun to write,
Okay.
and or the opposite, which ones you struggled with, which I think we kind of went over, but how about ones that were fun?
Well, I think that a couple come to mind that were fun to write. One would be when Jack and Ava hole up in the hotel and Jack needs a haircut and Ava cuts his hair. For me, that was I felt like that was one where I would have a chance to be just a little bit more playful and have a little bit of fun. And there aren't a lot of moments like that in the book.
That's true.
And
Yeah.
so
Pretty
it was
serious
this,
book.
yeah. So it was this chance for me to kind of let them get to know one another and build a relationship. And I could play a little bit with the love that develops between them. So that was fun. I also loved writing the scene at the gas station as they're on their way up um, to the woods and to the cabin in the final scenes. It was just another fun chance to kind of play on some of that setting and that feel of what a small town gas station feels
And
like.
did you base that on an actual gas station you're familiar with? Yeah.
Yeah, every year my family would go to Bill's Island, and we have a cabin there.
Wow.
And there's this gas station we would always stop at. So just creating some of those scenes that for me felt a little bit iconic. That was really fun. Uh, it's kind of weird to think of hard scenes because some of the hardest scenes are also my favorite scenes that for me are the most beautiful. So the final scenes of the book, they were not easy to write, and yet they are also the dearest to me.
Oh, I'm sure they meant the most. Yeah.
So yeah, so hard isn't always bad. Hard can also be the most beautiful, I think.
Was it harder
So
for you to write dialogue for Jack than it was for you to write, well, of course, Ava's mainly are thought processes. But.
Yeah, Ava often was actually almost like stream of consciousness for me.
Mm-hmm.
And so Ava came pretty easily. Jack's dialogue also, the dialogue between Jack and Maddie was some of my favorite dialogue to write.
How old are your children?
My two now are 24 and 20.
So when you started this, how old were they?
Oh goodness.
17?
Well, no, because it's been a few years since I sold What Beauty There Is. I think that they were probably more like
13, 14.
9 and 13. Yeah,
Okay.
about like 9 and 13.
And I can't recall, how old is Maddie in this book? Is he 6?
He's in 2nd grade, so
okay. Yeah.
He would be just a little bit younger than my daughter Katie was when I was writing. So,
so yeah, how do your kids like the book? Have they read it?
They have read it, yes. And my daughter, in fact, my daughter who's 20, she was my beta reader. She is a bookworm, and she told me places that were too boring, and she told me
that's good.
Told me, yeah, she was my reader that told me all the things that I needed to do to get it in shape before I sent it out and queried it. So yeah, it's fun. And she's reading my next one too before I send it out to my editor.
Has she told you anything's boring yet?
Oh, she's told me, she is not afraid to tell me the places that I need to do better. So, and she's a great help. In fact, she really is one of my trusted readers, along with my critique group. So,
if Sarah, if you have any other questions, put them in now, either in the Q&A
hi, Sarah.
or in the chat. If not, those were all my questions.
I hope this has been really fun for me. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for joining us.
Oh, I did mention on it. I don't know if there's a way to do this, Tanya, but I mentioned on my social media that I would give away some of the swag for the book, and I would love to. I don't know if there's a way to coordinate that with the Book Bungalow, but I would love to give away some of my swag. And there's a beautiful poster that is by an artist and illustrator named Mary Metzger. She did this for me, and it's supposed to be Jack and Ava. It's a beautiful little 2-sided poster. And then I also have some stickers. And maybe what we could do is maybe I could send you some of these to the book bungalow that you could give away to readers. How does that sound?
I will.
Okay.
I'll give something to the next person who buys the book, picks it up in the book. 2 people I think ordered the book through this site, but I don't think they were able. Well, no, Sarah was one. So Sarah, you'll get the your choice.
Awesome.
Of those 2 things. Okay.
And I'm getting your book, Sarah. I'd love to read it. So Sarah's local, is that right?
Sarah lives in Washington, right by us.
Awesome.
We did a launch for her sci-fi thriller Girl One.
Oh, exciting. Yeah, I would love to order it. So that sounds like a lot of fun. So I'll send some of those to you, and maybe you can do a giveaway or something like that.
That would be great. Thank you.
Okay, wonderful.
Thanks for talking. So, can't wait to read. She's excited. Okay. You should be. It's a great read. And I wish we could have, I will definitely follow up with an email with the recording link for all of them. So there's like 6 or 8 people who probably couldn't join us tonight who meant to. So,
okay. Awesome. And I'll send you the the slideshow with maybe just a little bit of info on each slide. It's kind of fun to see it. So, okay.
Oh, and remember, we've got copies of What Beauty There Is in our store, so you can order one through our website or come in the store. I put all the links in the chat. I'll put those links again in the follow-up email. And don't forget to take the survey if you enjoyed this author event. And get a chance for gift code to the gift card to the King's English. Once again, thanks, Cory. And thanks to all of you who joined us today. Stay safe, stay well, and we'll see you.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Bye-bye.